from Baltimore originally,
Oh, okay.
Baltimore County, but we've been over here since 2009. But I always loved the Eastern Shore in the fall, and always sort of envisioned myself on the shore long term, even from as a young adult. And so my wife and I, when we decided we wanted to start having kids, this was the natural place to come. A Capitol Hill lobbyist, that's what I describe myself as my entire career up until November of 2021, just a few months ago. That was who I was. So kind of a bow tie and wingtip guy on Capitol Hill as a lobbyist advocating for fish and wildlife conservation. And so did that from starting in 2003, pretty much right out of college until November. So that was my profession. For the last decade for the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, TRCP, which is a major national coalition of hunting and fishing organizations. And I ended my time there as their chief policy officer, so overseeing every aspect of their Capitol Hill work, for the development of public policy ideas and the implementation of the advocacy that made those ideas come to life. A lot of time in the Senate, a lot of time in the House, and thoroughly enjoyed that work until COVID hit, and it went from an in-person, like what we're doing now, face-to-face interactions and building relationships with people, to my dining room table in front of a computer screen, where my wife and kids were at school and I was home, and it got pretty lonely. You just couldn't have that same interaction. And so I decided it was time to think about what might be next for my career. The Eastern Shore Land Conservancy's got a 31-year record of success. And I think a legacy of success that would stand up to any local land trust in the country. And the credit for that goes in large part to Rob Edgen. And so I am mindful of that, and Rob has been incredibly generous in allowing me to kind of mine his thoughts and his experience. So we're not doing it alone. What makes me think that I can do it is that I love this place. I love talking about this place. And some of the things that were in play as I decided to sort of come back to this work is to be able to feel and touch the work that you're doing. I am the son of a Baltimore steelworker. I grew up with a single dad, and work in its essence was very important to me. That was the dinner table lesson from my dad. It was a hard day's work, and that's it. Act like somebody. And that carries with me through as a lobbyist, where I approached a very white-collar business in a pretty blue-collar way. Let's pack a lunch and let's lean in. All of that work is very cerebral, very intangible, conceptual in some ways. Advocacy, lobbying, public policy. You can work for a decade on a public policy idea and only make incremental progress. And frankly, I'd kind of had enough of that. I needed to feel more productive. I needed to feel like I was making a bigger difference on the ground. And I knew conceptually that, working on the Land and Water Conservation Fund and all the other bills that I worked on was having a huge impact out in the landscape. But it was probably time for me to turn my attention to how those programs were impacting the places that I loved. And there was no place in the running other than the Eastern Shore and the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy. And that is the magic of this place. It's often referred to as, when you get over on this side of the Bay Bridge, your blood pressure drops. Well, we should protect that. We should protect that feeling, because plenty of places to go for the other result. Plenty of places you can go that'll increase your blood pressure. Let's protect that. Let's protect the reason people come back here. One of the jobs that we do have to do is sort of reintroduce the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy to the community, and ensure that we're relevant in these times, because there are a lot of organizations, very good organizations, some of which I support, many of which I support personally, that are doing great work. And so there's a lot of I don't want to say competition, but it's sort of partnership, friendly competition for that community support. So we've got to be out there making it clear what the value proposition we have is for this community. So I think my first priority unquestionably is how does the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy become a resource to help our decision makers make better decisions. And as a Centerville Town Councilman, I kind of have a front row seat to how few resources are available to elected officials, to volunteer planning commission members, to any number of other folks that might like to see a different outcome from the local municipal planning and growth decision-making process. So often that process, a developer comes in, and this is not meant to judge any project, but the developer comes in, they have a vision, and the town or the county goes into what I would call a sort of reactive mode, reacting to the development and trying to make it all work. And I think helping town elected officials, helping county elected officials, planning commissioners understand, how they can make these things work a little better, what their roles are, and how they can understand the needs of their community, and then help to realize those needs through the decision-making process. Because I think those things have become pretty disconnected. I don't suggest ESLC staff is in the room every time there's a planning commission meeting. I'm not sure we can do that. I'm not sure that's the place for us. But to be able to empower the public, to know when to engage, to know how to engage, that's critically important. Because to know when to engage, to know how to engage, that's critically important. Because except for what's happening in Talbot County these days with TRAP, which has sort of got everybody's temperature, really high, and the volumes kind of turned up to 11. There was a lot of process that happened way, way, way before that, where the public probably wasn't involved and didn't know what was happening and didn't know how to engage. That's the problem we have to solve. We have to keep it from getting to this point of division where nothing is really getting achieved and people are yelling at each other. We've got to do better by our communities, and we've got to defend the sanctity of the comprehensive plan. That really is the tool whereby the community's needs are addressed. So ensuring that we're getting public engagement with those plans and their development is critical. Towns, counties, everybody. People wonder about ESLC and the town's work. What does this have to do with land conservation? And I don't think you can separate the two. The way we reduce pressure on farm field, cornfield developments, cul-de-sac developments out in the countryside is by making our towns better places to live. And if the towns aren't places where people want to live and do business, then they're going to look to come to the Eastern Shore some other way. And all too often that means, someplace out in the countryside, a subdivision that might be unseptic and might not be a great fit for the county in the future. My second goal would be to really ramp up our land protection effort. We are doing a lot of conservation easements still to this day, but there's room to do a lot more. And I think certainly a need to do a lot more. And so we want to increase our capacity to do easement work, to get lands permanently protected. We have a pretty substantial list of interested landowners, and it's just a matter of, they go to the end of the queue if they come to us. So what resources can we bring to bear to ensure that the supply meets demand, and we can get people's property protected and easements in place where we need them, and to sort of target that work where those protections are most needed, whether it's water quality or fish and wildlife habitat. Not every acre is the same. And I think a huge piece of that is certainly protecting the ability of production agriculture to exist on the Eastern Shore. I think it is clearly the biggest industry on the shore, biggest employer, and we've got to make sure that agriculture has a place on the Eastern Shore. And we've seen certainly a loss of tillable acreage over the years, And that raises some real difficult questions for this region. And I want to sustain, the way you sustain a rural place is by sustaining a rural economy. You have to make the impacts of climate resonant for people in the backyard. And I think that is the challenge of groups like Eastern Shore Land Conservancy and groups like Shore Rivers and Chesapeake Conservancy and other groups, is how do we make climate optimism real for people? How do we help plan for the impacts of something where the cat may in fact be out of the bag? And what does that look like? Keeping communities safe, from sea level rise, from flooding events, from storm events, from potentially, we don't have a ton of this, but from fire. And we see that mostly out west. And that's one of the things, active forest management is one of my priorities as a leader of this organization, but also as a conservationist. Forest health. How do we make climate real for people where they are? Meet them where they are and educate people, I think, because people walk by and drive by conservation challenges every day. When you drive over the Nanticoke River after Vienna and you see that ghost forest on the right, there it is. People don't know what they're seeing. Most people don't know what that is, but there it is. Here you see saltwater intrusion. You see marsh migration right here next to the road. And problems like that exist everywhere. You don't have to, that's just one good example. You drive by most forests, around here, a lot of them are even aged. All the trees are the same age. There's not a lot of biodiversity. What does a healthy forest look like? That's invasive species, same. We've got a lot of work to do right here at home to help people understand, the things you care about could be affected and may already be affected. And here's how we might be able to mitigate some of that impact.